But you went from the glamour of doing that, in all seriousness, to Vietnam. You were a MISTY fast forward air controller in the 416th, which was a legendary unit. Talk to us a little bit about what that adjustment was like. You flew 269 combat missions. What was that like? What was the adjustment like for you? What was the job like for you?
Well, I only flew 98 MISTY missions. The rest were just routine attack sorties. There was a 100-mission limit in MISTY. It was a 4-month or 100 missions limit because it was a little bit more dangerous than the routine in-country operation. So, and I was a commander of it, so I was in charge of scheduling, and I was on schedule to get my 100 missions. But they moved MISTY from Phuket, where it was originally organized, down to Tuy Hoa. And from my boss at Phuket, a guy by the name of Bill Creech, to my new boss at Tuy Hoa, Bruce W. Carr. So those are two famous airmen, if you
Absolutely.
want. And Bruce W. Carr fired me after he flew mission number 98 in my back seat. He wanted to get his own squadron commander, and he moved me up, and I was a chief check pilot for the wing working directly for Bruce W. Carr. The MISTY mission was a great mission because we were going out and developing the targets ourselves. I mean, the job was simple. Stop traffic down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And to do that, we had to be on the trail from before sunup to after sundown. We weren't up there at night. We had no night capability. But from nautical sunup to nautical sundown, I mean into the dim glow of twilight, we were there. And when we found some movement, we stopped it. So it was great because in country, you're bombing trees. You know, some staff weenie down at Saigon decided that certain coordinates were worth bombing, whether there was a target there or not. Usually there wasn't, so it was a waste of time. But we developed the targets ourselves in MISTY, and then we attacked them. And once we got a truck or something stopped, then we would call in other aircraft and you know, continue to attack it. But so it was a great mission. It was pretty dangerous. We had a lot of people shot down. We had the first commander, Bud Day, was a Medal of Honor guy. And one of my real boasts is I didn't lose anybody when I was in command of MISTY. Had one shot down, but we got both of the guys back. And so I didn't lose any people, but we got the job done as well as, you know, if it's a choice between mission accomplishment and losing people, you got to lose people because the mission comes first. But I was happy to be able to do the mission and not lose anybody. And when I was on the Thunderbirds, I replaced a solo pilot who was killed. And when I left, my replacement was killed. But when I was number 5 and I had a wingman, I kept him alive. And we did as good an air show as anybody. So mission accomplishment comes first, but getting your people back, get them home, that's, you know, that's part of leadership also. And in both those cases, in combat and in the air show business, those were potentially dangerous jobs that I'm very happy I got my people through.
How did it make you a better commander? How did it make you a better leader? How did it set you up for the future? And what skills did it give you that you relied on when you were chief?
Well, that is a philosophy question, and so I don't know if I'm much of a philosopher. Those jobs were the culminating experiences of a fighter pilot's career. I mean, in ordinary fighter squadrons in those days, probably still true, it's a competition every day. You have to prove yourself every day against everybody else in the squadron. I mean, you go up and you get videotape of who won, right? Or you go up and you get scored, and you can bet 50 cents a bullet hole if you're strafing or whatever. So every day is a competition that, for some reason, unifies the group. You'd think if I'm going up and getting killed every day by, this other guy, it would create dissension, but it doesn't. It's a cohesion factor, because nobody else knows that daily competition and the teamwork that develops out of it. So the air show business and combat were, for me, they came along at the right time. I mean, I was a very experienced fighter pilot when I got to combat. And so I pretty much knew what I was doing in an airplane. That's important. I mean, look, at the small unit level, there are only two things that are required of an officer. One is you know your business, top to bottom. People will not follow you if they think you don't understand the business. I don't care what kind of squadron you're in. Everybody in a small unit, everybody knows who knows what they're doing and who needs help, okay? And they will follow you if they think you know what you're doing. That's one thing. The other thing is they have to trust you. So even if you know what you're doing, if people think you're not trustworthy, they won't follow you. So those two things are what's required. You have to be expert at the job, and everybody has to think you're honest, dependable, reliable, trustworthy. If you got those two things, you can take a small unit anywhere. And in both the Thunderbirds as the lead solo pilot and in MISTY as a commander, I was operating in a small unit where the two things I had to have was skill in my job, and I was skilled, and people had to think I was trustworthy and honest, and I was. Now, once you get beyond that into larger units, group commander, wing commander, numbered Air Force commander, I had all those jobs. Major Air Command commander. It's not enough to know what you're doing and to have people trust you. That's necessary. That never changes. But you have to add some other qualities. And like I say, you ask a philosophical question, and I'm going on at great length here, and I think I ought to stop here, because if I start talking about what the requirements are with large units, including the Air Force. I took over as chief. The Air Force had 1 million people, more or less, in it. Okay, only half of that was active duty airmen, and the other half was Guard, Reserve, and civilian workforce. But knowing how to lead 1 million people requires more than just good hands in the cockpit and being trustworthy. As I say, that's a foundation, but it's not enough when you get to a big organization. So if you want to know the answer to that question, you're going to have to read one of my books.
I'm happy to do that. But if you could briefly summarize, though, what's the trick at that size? Because, and I want to get to this in a second, I do have a couple of other Vietnam questions, but you needed all of those skills to drive the Air Force to a fundamental new organization for the Cold War, which was a gigantic leadership challenge. It was a strategic challenge, but it was also a leadership challenge. What was the key to leading the organization at that size and scale?
Communication. And that's a one-word answer, but it covers a lot of different things. You have to be able to communicate to everybody what it is we're trying to do around here. Why do you come to work in the morning? what's the product? And so first of all, that's a deceptively simple question. Just what is it today that the Air Force is trying to do? Sounds like an easy question, right? It is an easy question. It's a hard answer. So not only do you have to understand what it is we're trying to do around here, you have to be able to explain it to people who disagree with you, maybe, or who haven't thought about it. I mean, they're driving to work and they're worried about their wife and kids, right? I mean, they're human. You have to sit them down and say, here's what we're trying to do here. Here's your part in it. Here's why it's important that we get there. And so, in the first instance, you have to communicate that to the senior people who work for you. But that's not enough. I used to talk about skip echelon communication because I had to step over the other 4-stars and talk to the majors and the captains and the tech sergeants. And so those are skills that are not needed at small unit level because at the small unit, everybody knows everybody. You know this guy walks in the door, you know if he's any good at his job, you know if he can be trusted, right? And that's all you need to know. But to take on the job above a certain size unit, it's, you don't know everybody. It's impossible for me to know 1 million people on a first-name basis. So, but you have to figure out how to get the message to those people. You know, Casey Stengel was asked one time about leadership. And of course, he had a small unit, 9 guys in a baseball team, at least on the field, one time. He said, leadership is keeping the 4 guys who hate you away from the 5 guys who haven't made up their mind. That's pretty good, and that's the kind of thing that will work on a small unit, but it won't work when you're trying to. My wing, when I was a wing commander, I had 6,000 people in it. And I didn't know all 6,000 of them. So you have to figure out a way to lead 6,000 people as a wing commander. Now, most wings are smaller than that. That was a large wing. F-111 wing, NATO wing, 75 F-111s, bunch of nuclear weapons on my base, so on. So it was a big responsibility. But that was the beginning, really what the beginning, because I was a base commander, I had 1,000 people working for me. People who were doing, you know, civil engineer squadron, security police squadron. I don't know anything about civil engineering. I had to lead civil engineers who probably all guessed that I didn't know anything about civil engineering. So already when I walk in the room, they're saying to themselves, this guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. So you have to have this broader ability to summarize what it is that you want to have done, why it's important, and to motivate people to do it. Communication.